Yo, what's up? Amateur Lore here, and we're literally so close to March Madness I can taste it. So y'all know what the vibes are. We're back with some more insane March Madness runs that you just might have forgot about. These videos take a while to make, so a like and a sub would be smacko. I don't want to make this intro too long. I want to get right into this video because I'm excited about it. Anyway, let's jump right in. Alright, so the first team that I'm going to be talking about in this entry, I literally almost forgot about. And when I tell you this run came out of nowhere and shocked the entire college basketball world, I mean that. Anyway, the first team up is the 2016/2017 South Carolina Gamecocks. So when it comes to the history of South Carolina basketball, I'm going to be honest, they haven't done much in this program's 117 plus years of playing college basketball, only making the men's basketball tourney 10 times, with just about half of those tourney appearances coming back before tournament seeding even was a thing. And not counting the season I'm covering today, but up to that point, South Carolina had not won a March Madness game from the 1974/75 college basketball season to the one that I'm covering today, as they would go one and done in the men's basketball tournament in 1974, 1989, 1997, 1998, and 2004. Which is why I had to add this team to this video, because what the Gamecocks would do during the 2016/2017 college basketball season would be straight out of a Hollywood movie, as the run this team would go on would easily eclipse everything this program has managed to accomplish in 100 plus years in one run in March. So let's take a look at this 2016/2017 South Carolina Gamecocks basketball team. So coming into the season, the Gamecocks were actually coming off one of their best basketball seasons in program history, going 24-8, as this season until the one we're covering today was their most wins in program history. And somehow, even after winning 24 games, they'd be left out of the men's basketball tournament. And I was looking to find some of the reasons they were left out, but I honestly couldn't find much. I guess it had to do with their weak non-conference schedule, but I mean, they still had a big win on the road at the 8th ranked Texas A&M Aggies, and once again, they finished the year with 24 wins. I just don't get it. If you have a better explanation for why the Gamecocks didn't make the tourney this year, comment them down below. Even though the Gamecocks would be left out of the tourney and not make much noise in the NIT, there was still a bright side to this year, as it was one of the best seasons in program history, and South Carolina would have 9 players returning from that team for next season. So if South Carolina could build off that incredible year, coming into the 2016/17 college basketball season, the Gamecocks might be able to do something never before done in program history. But whoa, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. I'm assuming the Gamecocks had some type of hype coming into the 2016/17 season. I didn't look at the SEC preseason predictions yet, so let's do that real quick. Yeah, I was totally wrong, apparently, as I guess according to most of the SEC preseason predictions for the 2016/2017 college basketball season, the South Carolina Gamecocks were expected to finish about 9th in the SEC and predicted to win about 16 games and not make the big dance. But we all know when your team is on one of my thumbnails to expect something great from them. So let's take a look at some of the gentlemen who are ringing bells across Columbia. Leading the Gamecocks at head coach and drawing up all the X's and O's in his 4th year up to that point was Frank Martin. And South Carolina fans, let me know. I know the pickings are slim, but where do you rank him all time for Gamecocks head coaches? Let me know down below in the comments. Moving over to the starting 5, we start with the guards and this team's leading scorer, Cinderella March, who would average a monster 21.4 points per game with 7 boards and 2 helpers. He would also make the league, getting drafted in the 2nd round of the NBA draft. Next guard up, PJ Dozier, who'd finished 2nd on the team in scoring, finishing the season averaging 13.9 points per game, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. And finally, to round out the guards, Dwayne Notice putting up 10, 2, and 3. Shuffling our way over to the big man, we start with the team's starting forward, Chris Silva, averaging 10 and 6. And finally, the team's starting center, Maik Kotsar. I probably pronounced that wrong, I'll put the name up on screen, who finished the season averaging 5 and 4. Okay, so the South Carolina Gamecocks start to the 2016/2017 college basketball season would mirror their previous season, as they would roar out the gate, starting the season 8-0. But unlike the previous seasons, they would actually rack up a decent non-conference win, taking down the 25th ranked Michigan Wolverines at home in dominant fashion, 61-46. And with how things turned out last year, this win was a very important resume builder for South Carolina. Right before SEC play was set to start, South Carolina would be sitting with a record of 10 and 3, but would really take things to the next level during conference play, going 9 and 1 in the SEC through their first 10 games, with their only loss coming on the road against the 5th ranked Kentucky Wildcats, and having another big signature win against the 19th ranked Florida Gators 57-53 during the stretch. I swear, every March Madness video I make, somebody beats up on my Florida Gators. But hey, at least this is the last time during this intro I have to talk about the Gamecocks taking down the Gators. Anyway, South Carolina would be sitting with a record of 19 and 4 and being 9 and 1 in SEC play. But from this point on in the season, the Gamecocks would start to fall off a cliff, closing out their season and the remainder of their SEC games going 3 and 5, finishing the regular season with an overall record of 22 and 9 before the SEC tournament would start. In the quarterfinals of the SEC basketball tournament, South Carolina would be matched up against the Alabama Crimson Tide, a team who'd only gone 18 and 3 during the regular season. But I do have to mention, though, that one of those 18 wins would come against the Gamecocks, in a game that saw South Carolina star guard Cinderella March dropping a 44 bomb. But even that wouldn't be enough to give the Gamecocks the edge, as the Tide would win in a quadruple overtime thriller 90-86. Real quick, comment down below the longest game you've ever watched live. I don't think I've ever seen a game go to quadruple overtime. Back to South Carolina versus Tide. That was round 1. Would round 2 in the SEC tournament be even better? Long story short, absolutely not. Well, I'm being a little bit dramatic. The game was pretty close deep into the second half, but Bama would pull away around the 2-minute mark of the game, closing it out on a 9-0 run, winning against South Carolina 64-53, putting an end to the Gamecocks SEC tournament. And if you were looking for the highlights, I was too, bro. Let me know when you find them. Amateur lore is like 3-12 when it comes to finding some of these older conference tournament highlights. Even though 2016/17 isn't that long ago, but it is what it is. As long as I can find the March Madness games, it's all Gucci. But wait, that's assuming that South Carolina would make it, as they were currently sitting at 20-10. And as we should all remember, the Gamecocks finished last season with a record about 2 or 3 games better and was still left off the VIP list. I'm sure back then around selection time, maybe some of the Gamecocks fans were nervous, but they had done more than enough to make the tourney and would be awarded with the 7th seed, set to face off against the 10th-seeded Marquette Golden Eagles. South Carolina was making the men's basketball tournament for the first time since 2004, and just making it wasn't enough, as this squad really felt like they were coming into this tourney with a chip on their shoulder. And I would show the highlights versus the Golden Eagles, but South Carolina would win by 20, 93-73. And while this game was competitive at one point, once we got to the 10-minute mark of the second half, the Gamecocks would run away with this matchup, sending them to the next round of the tournament where things would honestly turn up to a whole nother level, as the Gamecocks would be matching up against the 2nd-seeded Duke Blue Devils, who were absolutely loaded with countless NBA players, most notably Jason Tatum. So here we were, South Carolina versus Duke, with the trip to New York and the Sweet 16 on the line.
In their first round matchup against Troy, and that's poked away from behind, right off of Silva, and right back in the hands of Dozier. Here's Thornwell, superstar right here, folks. Scores it with a left hand. He can. Jason Tatum all the way in for a two-handed. The freshman, Kim Felder, on for the first time. Will run the point. Thornwell. Here's Allen. And that's partially tipped by Mackey. And a three-point hit from Matt Jones. The 7-man rotation they play with. Shot clock down to 2. Long three-pointer is up. Shot clock down to 3. Balls on the floor. Notice comes away with it. Up ahead to Silva. What a pass. What a throwdown. Point range for the Duke point guard. Inside, Silva catches it deep. Up and over Giles. Countdown. Mackey has 4 boards. Gives it up. Kotsar inside. Right back to Notice. And Notice! Jackson trying to push it. Finds Tatum. 4-3. Yes, sir! Then they held ball. Duke has possession. They break the press. Up ahead, Mackey. And Mackey with a two-handed jam! The South Carolina Gamecocks, for the first time in program history, are headed to the...
South Carolina would upset the Duke Blue Devils in the second round of the men's basketball tournament, 88-81, behind a 24-point night from Cinderella Thornwell. And while he might have shocked the Duke and the college basketball world with his big performance, the fans repping the Gamecocks were not shocked at all, as this was just another day at work for him. And while his big performance played a huge role in this upset, we can't forget about Dwayne Notice and Chris Silva, who would both contribute 17 points each, which would also play a big part in propelling the Gamecocks to the Sweet 16, where they would match up versus the 3rd-seeded Baylor Bears. But I'm not done glazing this Cox win versus the Blue Devils, as I have to shout out their huge effort on defense, holding 2 future NBA first-round picks in Jason Tatum and Luke Kennard both under 15 points. Overall, just an amazing performance from South Carolina. Alright, moving on to the Sweet 16 where South Carolina would face off against Baylor. The Gamecocks would be 3-point dogs coming into this game, but to keep things short and sweet, South Carolina would roll over Baylor, being up by 15 going into the second half. And once the second half would start, nothing would change. Actually, I think it would be just better to show than tell.
Not sure what to do there. Silva is into the corner. Got it! 5.5 to go. Shot clock at 7. Thornwell. It is over.
South Carolina versus Baylor wouldn't be much of a contest, as the Gamecocks would win in a dominant fashion 70-50, thanks to once again another 24-point night from Cinderella Thornwell, and another great overall defensive performance, as South Carolina would force the Bears to shoot 30% from the field and 23% from the 3-point line, as well as forcing 16 turnovers. And when the defense is playing like this and you shoot 40% from the 3-point line, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that South Carolina would win by 20 against Baylor. And we're now moving on to the Elite 8, where look at this, they would be matched up against my Florida Gators with a trip to the Final Four on the line. South Carolina was making program history each and every time they made it farther into March Madness, as their win versus Marquette at the start of the tournament was South Carolina's first tournament win since the 1972-73 college basketball season, and their win versus Baylor sent them to their first Elite 8 in program history. So no matter what happened versus Florida, this season from the Gamecocks had already been a major success. But yeah, South Carolina wasn't thinking about how far they've made it and how lucky they were. The Gamecocks were hungry, and Gator was on the menu. The South Carolina Gamecocks versus the Florida Gators with the trip to the Final Four on the line. which SEC school would be headed home, and which school would be booking a flight from New York to Arizona.
During the course of the year, they split, as you mentioned, but the action was really tough. A lot of free throw attempts taken and a lot of turnovers. They don't take a play off in the defensive end.
Shot is up and good. Jumper. Pass notice. Chioza is back. Hero of the win the other night. But Thornwell got Leon. Florida will run.
Wants to go all the way and kick.
Back outside. Leon for three. Yeah, it's been a pretty good line.
Yeah, well deserved, my friend.
Rakeem Felder. Rakem. Into the corner.
And I think that's what Frank Martin's going to run. Now, drive into the hoop, you better be careful.
Turnaround jumper. Perfect.
Now to protect him from fouls.
Thornwell has 11 in the game. Another three.
Passive zone right now, though.
Chioza. Oh, well, why not? 2 minutes. There's that nice soft jumper again. Gators up 8. Dozier. Oh, brother. There to grab the rebound for South Carolina. Here's Dozier behind the back. Wow.
Yes, they can.
6 on the shot clock. Muscles his way in. Chioza.
Nice work by Robinson, too, to help. Look at that.
Loose ball. Chioza. Wow.
Oh, that's up for grabs.
Yep. Thornwell has it. Let's see if he takes it all the way. Nope. Back to Kotsar. Yes! Ever. Final four. But this one, as you said, far from determined because of plays like that. Chioza hit a three the other night. This time he muscles his way in and gets a
Kick it out.
Here's Chioza. And to take it away. Dozier. Notice. Oh, yes! Allen. Leon. Game over. Gamecocks are in the final.
There are 3 things that are guaranteed in life: death, taxes, and the team that Amateur Lore is covering beating up on his favorite team, the Florida Gators. More seriously though, the Gamecocks would pull off the huge win, taking down the Florida Gators 77-70 in the Elite Eight in a matchup that started off looking like the Gators might run away with the game, as they would finish off the first half with a nice 8-2 run, seeing the Gators going up by 7 going into the second half. But that is where the positives for Florida would end, as the second half would be all South Carolina and all Cinderella Thornwell, as the star guard for the Gamecocks would close out the final 10 minutes of the match, scoring 11 of his game-high 26, sealing the deal and giving the Gamecocks the edge, defeating the Gators and advancing the South Carolina Gamecocks to their first Final Four in program history. But they would be matching up versus the first-seeded Gonzaga Bulldogs in Atlanta, with a trip to the national championship on the line.
Defense on one end, you forget Gonzaga pretty good at this end.
And that's saved by Kotsar, and from the outside. Melton. Well, you said it, Bill. He can.
Gamecocks.
He's a tough kid. Nice dish. How about this? That's where Silva.
Nelson. That's his second one.
South Carolina loves Thornwell right there in the middle.
There's a three-point shot. Mackey, who's been huge off the bench, hit a couple of threes. Floater, and wow, is he coming up big? Had it. A fraction long. Matthews, who's getting hot. And he hits again.
Let you elevate first. Watch the early jumper.
Matthews, oh boy. And Silva is the one who makes the steal. Dozier thinks twice about it. Thornwell, big shot. Got it.
This is a nice pick and pop situation and a duck in.
Williams Goss, Karnowski.
There you go.
Perimeter. Very versatile defender for the Gonzaga Bulldogs.
Here's Thornwell. Blocked again by Collins. His 6th.
How
of
about
the game. It's ball game. Gonzaga is going to be playing Monday night.
South Carolina would fight extremely hard in the Final Four versus the Bulldogs, and would even see themselves down by as much as 11 at one point in the second half, but would scratch and claw their way back into the game, actually taking the lead late into the second half. But the Bulldogs would be too much, as Gonzaga would close the game out stronger, taking down South Carolina in the Final Four 77-73. But let's end this entry on a positive note. From not winning a tournament game since around 1975, to making it all the way to the Final Four and breaking numerous program records during the 2016-17 college basketball season, this campaign from South Carolina is definitely one the Gamecock faithful won't be forgetting about anytime soon, and is definitely one of the many reasons I love March Madness. Leaving South Carolina, we head over to Kansas to cover the next team up in this video, the 2012/13 Wichita State Shockers. This Shocker squad we're going to be covering today is probably one of the greatest bracket busters to ever F shit up in March, as they would hold the throne as the most successful 9th seed in March Madness ever for years, until a team that I've already covered, the FAU Owls, go check that video out already if you haven't seen it, would join them at the peak of Mount 9th seed. But unlike FAU, the Shockers actually had some success throughout the college basketball world before the season we're covering today, as before that, Wichita State had made a couple of deep March Madness runs, making the Elite Eight during the 1963, 1964, and the 1981 men's basketball tournament. But pretty much after that 81 season, the Shockers would never reach that level of success again until the best coach in program history would come along in 2007, taking the Shockers program to new heights never before seen. And ever since this coach's firing due to allegations of player abuse, the great Wichita State basketball program has never been the same. But hopefully they can turn things around, because basketball is more fun when the Shockers are playing at a high level. Alright, so coming into this magical season, the Shockers were actually coming off of a pretty decent year, as they had gone 27-5 during the season and would make the tournament as the 5th seed, which is pretty high for a non-Power 5 team, but would sadly lose to VCU in their first game of the tournament 62-59. And even though losing sucks, this season was still something to build off of, and there was plenty of positives to take away from this year. And the wider media of the Missouri Valley Conference would feel the exact same way, as most of the 2012/2013 Missouri Valley Conference preseason predictions I could find would have the Wichita State Shockers finishing second in their conference behind the Doug McDermott-led Creighton Blue Jays. And since the Missouri Valley Conference is one of the more respected non-power conferences, if the Shockers could finish as predicted, they would more than likely be guaranteed a spot in the big dance. So with that short little intro out of the way, let's take a look at some of the key figures a part of this magical 2012/13 Shockers basketball team. Leading the program in his 6th year up to that point, we got the controversial coach, Greg Marshall, and while his methods might be a little extreme, they did get the job done. Moving over to the starting 5, this team rocked a bunch of different lineups, so I'm going to go with the one they rolled out the most, which starts us with the guards, taking us to Malcolm Armstead, who'd finished second on the team in scoring, averaging 10-3-4, to Keely Cotton, averaging 6-3-1, and finally to round out the guards, Demetric Williams, who'd finished the year putting up 7-2-2. Before I forget, I have to shout out these two stud guards who'd shine bright during March, Fred Van Fleet and Ron Baker. Rotating over to the Paint Patrollers, we start with the team's leading scorer, forward Cleanthony Early, who'd average 14-5, and finally the 7-foot center, Hyman Arupe, who'd finished the season averaging 2-4. And I most likely pronounced his name wrong, well at least his first name, so I'm going to put that up on screen. So when it comes to the Wichita State Shockers 2012/2013 regular season, there isn't really much to cover, and I don't mean that in a bad way. This school was just so dominant throughout the regular season that there just wasn't really much to talk about, going an insane 15-1 through their first 16 games of the season, with their only loss coming on the road to the Tennessee Volunteers. I will admit that after this scorching start to the season, the Shockers would somewhat drop back down to reality, as before the Missouri Valley Conference tournament would start, the Shockers would go 9-6, losing 3 games in a row at one point after starting the season off 15-1. And I'm not saying they were limping into the conference tournament, but they would lose their last 2 regular season games entering the 2013 Missouri Valley Conference tournament on a 2-game losing streak, which is never good. But Wichita State would bounce back once things got serious, winning their first 2 games of the conference tournament pretty convincingly, 69-59 against Missouri State and 66-51 against Illinois State, setting up a matchup in the conference championship versus the Creighton Blue Jays. I would show the highlights, but the only ones I could find of this game are recorded on a DS camera, and they have the old Sunday night countdown music, you know, the "he could go all the way" face ass type beat. OGs know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Creighton would come out on top of the Shockers in a pretty competitive game, 68-65, even though the Wichita State defense would do their job on Doug McDermott, holding him to only 14 points. But other players for the Blue Jays would step up to hand the Shockers their 8th loss of the season. Now, since Wichita State was sitting at 26-8 and played ball in a pretty competitive and well-respected conference, they wouldn't have to worry about if they made the men's basketball tournament or not, as they would be rewarded with a 9th seed, which seems kind of low if you ask me, but it is what it is, and would be matched up against the 8th seeded Pitt Panthers. Now, we're going to simulate past this game as the Panthers would get blown off the hardwood by the Shockers, as Wichita State would defeat them 73-55. And before we move on to one of the best games of the 2013 men's basketball tournament, I gotta give a shout out to Malcolm Armstead, Brody dropped a cool 22, and shout out to the Shockers defense as a whole, as they would hold the Panthers to under 36% from the field and under 6% from beyond the arc. With splits like this, it's no wonder why it was the Shockers advancing to the next round, where they would be faced with the Herculean task of competing with the first seeded Gonzaga Bulldogs, who were being led by future NBA first round pick Kelly Olynyk, and as a team, they only had lost 2 games the entire season up to this point. It would be no surprise that the Shockers would be about 7-point dogs to the Dogs. Could Wichita State make some magic happen against Gonzaga to send them to California for the next leg of the tourney, or would it all end right here in Salt Lake City?
10. This is Cotton. Here's Armstead against the Zach's best defender. Armstead can't hit. Cotton is. Here's Pangos, the sophomore phenom. Olynyk, national player of the year.
What's called a pocket pass back to the big fella.
Pangos. Hard. Get it. 7 Gonzaga turnovers. Here's only the conference defensive player of the year. Baker thought about it. Coming to deep. Got it. shoot. Here's Olynyk. Guarded by the field. Hitting the feet. Oh, such confidence from Armstead. Olynyk barreling to the rim. On the ropes. Although they have cut it down to 1. Poked away, gets it back. Suffocating defense. Van Fleet, contact, and he's headed to the free throw line. A little used forward. Certainly of late, getting some very important minutes here.
Olynyk outstanding in the mid and high post against the zone.
Pangos. Ruben. CBS Marquette over Butler to send the Golden Eagles to the Sweet 16. Baker with an enormous 3. Early. Monster 3.
What winning basketball is about.
You just saw that graphic. That could be the story of the game. The difference, 17 offensive rebounds by Gonzaga. Oh, they leave Pangos for the 3. We come up on 6 minutes left. Cotton gets the throw. Harris, great position. 5 to shoot. Pangos just born for the big moment. Early for the 3. Early nearly left his feet to Baker, and he sticks the 3. The ropes here in Salt Lake City. Baker. Stockton. Olynyk.
Armstead likes to go left and shoot floaters when he can. The shot clock's going down.
4 to shoot. Van Fleet, a freshman. Long 3. He buries it. 11-point lead for the Orange. 6.3 to play. The inbounds to Van Fleet. It's stolen. Pangos on a 3. And then will do it. Wichita State knocks off the #1 team in the country. And the Shockers dancing to the Sweet 16.
Wichita State versus Gonzaga would be peak fiction. I really mean that. This game would start off with the Shockers running on the Dogs early, and then Gonzaga would start to assert their dominance, giving the Shockers a taste of their own medicine, going on their own little run, culminating in the final 6 to 7 minutes of this ball game being everything we've all come to love about March Madness. And thanks to some huge performances from 2 freshmen, Ron Baker and Fred VanVleet, the Shockers would come out on top of the first-seeded Gonzaga Bulldogs 76 to 70, sending the Shockers to the Sweet 16 where they would face off against a team going on their own little magical run, the 13th-seeded LaSalle Explorers. But before we get to that game, I have to shout out the Shockers defense, as they would hold the Bulldogs to under 36% from the field and under 34% from the 3-point line, while on the other hand, the Shockers would shoot exactly 50% from the field and 50% from 3. And I say this all the time, but with shooting splits like this, it shouldn't be a shock that Wichita State was advancing to the next round. Now, after that huge win, the bracket the Shockers were in would somewhat bless them in their Sweet 16 matchup, as instead of facing off against the Kansas State Wildcats or the Marshall Henderson-led Ole Miss Rebels, they instead will be matched up against the 13th-seeded LaSalle Explorers. And the Explorers were no slouch, they were playing some good basketball, but this Shocker squad was on a whole nother level, dominating the Explorers in the Sweet 16, winning 72 to 58. And when taking a look at the splits, Wichita State would dominate the box score, holding the Explorers under 35% from the field, while the Shockers would shoot 41% from 3 and out rebound LaSalle 47 to 29. Another good outing from Wichita State. And after their win in the Sweet 16, they'd be moving on to their next game of the men's basketball tournament against the Aaron Craft-led second-seeded Ohio State Buckeyes in the Elite Eight, with a trip to Atlanta in the Final Four on the line. Who'd survive the battle royale that is March Madness? The Wichita State Shockers or the Ohio State Buckeyes?
See if they can get him going early offensively, put him on their shoulders.
Buckeyes have it, they took care of it.
Walk-in jump shot. Doesn't look like Armstead's going to give him any type of resistance.
Anthony early. Kraft has been much more aggressive with his shot. Smith Jr. with a 3. All the wins big for a team like Wichita State from the Missouri Valley. Here's a shot outside early. Wichita State took care of number 1 seed Gonzaga, you may recall. Also beat 8 seed Pitt. Kraft.
Early guys will deny you without it, and they'll smother you if you have it.
Early. Chin picked up by Van Vliet. He'll beat the defense of Kraft, and here comes Armstead. That's a 3. And Hall down low. That's the 5 out there for Wichita State. Armstead with a sweep.
He said Ronnie Johnson, the freshman point guard for Purdue, very much the same like Malcolm Armstead.
Armstead met by the defense of Kraft. Demetric Williams for 3.
Oh, my goodness. Force the defense to put you on the line, and they still haven't really attacked. That's
Thomas,
better.
here he comes right now. A game and shooting almost 50% from the field. They've got 22 points into the second half. The drive by Thompson.
Trying to pound Armstead, taking a lot out of his offense.
Armstead is just
pressure. They're great in the half court, but not the full court.
Baker. Armstead over Smith.
Get checked by the doctors, back on the bench now. But I think Marshall likes these 4 guards on the floor.
Smith playing with 4 fouls. Scott off to Ross. That's a 3. Picked up by Thomas. Into Hall. Here comes Kraft. Armstead is defending. Hall is watching Thomas. Screen by Kraft. Opens up the shot for Ross.
They stop looking at the clock. It doesn't necessarily mean the shot clock.
Thomas now comes up defensively on Van Fleet. Shot clock at 8. Cotton an open 3. 7 to 4. In for the Shockers. Thomas. Corkscrewing on Hall. He puts in a
role players are going to have a significant role in this game because the stars cancel each other out.
Van Fleet. 5 to shoot. It's Kraft. A 3. And he gets it. Down by 4, launching the 3, and a shocker in Los Angeles. Wichita State is going to the Final Four.
The Shockers would put together one of their best performances of the entire season, taking down the Ohio State Buckeyes in the Elite Eight 70-66. And while the score seemed super close, the Shockers were in front and looked in control for majority of the game, as the Shockers would advance to the Final Four, becoming the first team in March Madness history to make the Final Four as the 9th seed, where they would be matched up against a red-hot first-seeded Louisville squad, with a trip to the Natty on the line. There's no need to set the scene or hype this game up. I mean, win and you're in the Natty, with a chance to immortalize your name in history forever. Need I say more?
Hall and Jang, the jump center. Here we go. And it's going to be Wichita State with their hands on it. We'll see a lot of zone, all zone from Syracuse in game 2 tonight. Here's Baker open for 3. Got it.
On its side, some size.
Smith, extra pass, a good one underneath on the baseline.
They strut around with that swag.
I saw you come into the hotel with your entourage a couple days ago. Here's Siva. Outside, tipped in. Wichita State's only got 2 points in the last 6 minutes now. Baker will try the same spot. This time it's good.
That's one of the strengths of their club, their perimeter play. Because then it opens up passing lanes inside.
That might help him, Dick.
Just 56-29 in the second half.
They might end up needing an explosion like that here tonight. Underneath, Hall. Nice move. And 1.
Turnovers and getting layups. They got a challenge on their hands.
Here's Henderson for 3. There's a big shot from...
Oh, man. Seven horseshoes.
Henderson will try the same spot.
Wow. It's like a team with a fighter with that lead in the little room, but on the ropes.
They'll try 3 and got it. 3. And now he weaves his way inside for a 2.
He really...
Aware of that. Are they aware of that? Well, they're going to turn it over anyway. Here comes Smith in transition. Baker tried for the block and...
Tough to get by. Look at the movement.
Giving Van Fleet some issues, though, but Van Fleet got it to Hall in close. Approaching 2 minutes. Hancock, who's had a big night, 14 so far, and another 3. Armstead, Jang on him. Mismatch on the outside. He's got to give it up. Got it inside and score it inside. Not going to matter.
Don't want to foul him.
Baker, a runner. Louisville has come back from near death, down 12, to advance to the championship Monday night.